we could have the best of all worlds. We have technology. We got rid of so many existential problems that have always plagued humans and just life on Earth in general. We got rid of that. We could live in the best of all worlds, but for some reason, we're constructing the worst of all worlds collectively together. And for me, it's mind-blowing because we're all so clever individually, and our collective intelligence is the dumbest stuff ever. And I believe the only reason why we're not doing this is because we just have bad metaphysical ideas. One is physicalism and the other is dogmatic, static religions. If we start to become more compassionate in the sense that we suddenly realize, hey, we're part of this crazy matrix of life and being on Earth, why would I be cruel to other people? Why wouldn't I be empathetic to people who are suffering? Like, why wouldn't there be more connection? And I think this is the thing that happened in the West, where we suddenly became so individualized.
Welcome to the Mr. Rat Show, where I talk to the most interesting global personalities about the future of humanity.
Hello, beautiful humans. Let me share a news clip from December 2074, about 50 years from now. Breakthrough update. Scientists in Switzerland proved today that humans' thoughts can change physical reality. Using simple meditation techniques, a group of volunteers successfully altered the behavior of water molecules just by focusing their minds. Dr. Sarah Kim, who led this study, explains.
We've discovered what ancient shamans always knew. Consciousness isn't just something your brain produces. It's a fundamental force of nature. When people focus their awareness together, they can literally reshape the world around them.
Already, cities are using thought-responsive buildings that adjust temperature and lighting based on their inhabitants' moods. Farmers, on the other hand, are growing healthier crops through focused intention. Now, even climate scientists are testing whether group meditation can influence weather patterns. Now, of course, I made this up, but what if consciousness really is the key to everything? What if our thoughts have power we've never imagined? Today, I'm joined by James Gladfelder, a scientist and philosopher who argues that consciousness isn't just in our heads. It's the foundation of reality itself. His latest book, The Sapient Cosmos, claims that we're not just observers of the universe, we're actively creating it. James, how are you doing?
Hi, thank you for having me. This was a great introduction, and I really hope to hear this headline play in 50 years. That would be awesome, because at the moment it doesn't quite look as though, this is something that will happen too quickly. Mostly in a Western context where we're all rational people, where we have been taught that there is basically one metaphysical view, which is the correct one, which only recently has been kind of uncovered as being a metaphysical belief. And this is the materialistic, reductionistic view of reality, now called physicalism in a modern context. And this tells you that, no, there's no way that consciousness can have this causal power, not even on reality. So your free will is an illusion. And that consciousness could be shaping reality is impossible. But slowly we are seeing the renaissance of idealism in philosophy, and also in a newer generation of scientists and physicists who've been asking themselves, hey, we've done great progress in science. We've discovered so much, understood so much, but somehow the fundamental questions still remain as elusive as ever. So in the philosophy of mind, it's the hard problem, which David Chalmers 20 years ago posed at a conference. How do you get from matter that's not conscious to this inner perspective, our subjective view, our window into reality? How does that work? And to this day, this is very contentious, and it's split the philosophy of mind community into two camps. One say, yeah, consciousness probably isn't a big deal, just forget about it, don't worry. And the others say, maybe we should reconsider more radical metaphysical ideas like idealism. And then you have fundamental physics, which just has not progressed in understanding fundamental reality in the last 30 years. I mean, we had string theory, which was the most popular attempt at bringing gravity and the quantum forces together. Yeah, this was an interesting program. It produced a lot of very cool mathematics, but it didn't tell us anything more about the nature of reality. And now, yeah, a younger generation of physicists are asking themselves, maybe we've reached a dead end because we're just stuck in the wrong paradigm of thinking about reality. And the paradigm is philosophy, it's metaphysical. And this is something that physicists usually, or until recently, weren't very concerned about. Actually, they were quite openly hostile towards philosophy because they thought philosophy is a waste of time. It's just arguing, gives you nothing. Like, why should you bother? But now we're realizing science is how stuff works in the universe. And we understand that with math. But science doesn't tell us what stuff is. And that's not the job of science. That's the job of metaphysics.
Right.
And metaphysics begins where science ends. So you cannot prove or disprove metaphysics, which,
interesting.
Circling back to what I started with, this dominant dogma in rational thought in the West, physicalism. Yeah, the world is based on material stuff. You can reduce it. This is a metaphysical belief, and you can't prove it. It's just as unprovable as saying actually consciousness is fundamental. And if you ask, yeah, no, but it makes sense. Come on, there's this objective world out there. Yeah, we don't really know that. We're always locked in consciousness. The only thing that we all experience is our own consciousness. And everything you perceive is a step further out. And we know from neuroscience that the world, this coherent world that emerges, it's a hallucination in the brain. It's constructed. It's not a one-to-one mapping. People like Donald Hoffman, they actually show with a model and examples in biology that perception is not tuned to give accuracy or an accurate representation. It's tuned for survival. So depending what organism you have a different perception of reality. So the idea that there's this objective reality out there, we really don't know what it is. And I mean, Immanuel Kant already, claimed that this is the noumenon. There's this thing out there, the base reality we will never be able to touch or know about. And so the question is, what if you don't consider philosophy, you will never think about concepts like solipsism, which says, actually, I claim everything that I experience is in my mind. Only my own mind exists. Nothing else exists.
What is the name of that concept?
Solipsism.
Again?
Solipsism. And this is a crazy idea because the problem is you cannot argue against it. You can't debunk it theoretically or empirically because I do not know if anything exists outside. I don't know if I'm in a simulation. I don't know if my brain is just kept alive in a vat and it's fed with these electrical impulses, which from the inside would give the exact same experience of reality I'm experiencing now, but it's just artificially connected to external input fed by a computer, for example. I cannot exclude these things. I do not know. I do not know that you have the same thing going as me, the same experience. And this is the problem of other minds. And the only reason that this isn't a bigger deal is because most philosophers say, look, this just has no utility. If you start to go down that rabbit hole, then everything just gets thrown out of the window and we just can't do anything. But these things have to be discussed. These are like parts of serious discussions we need to have. And this has been something physicists and scientists have often shied away from or weren't even aware of. And that's why they didn't realize physicalism is metaphysics and not something which science dictates.
Right. Hold on a second. I want to challenge you here on something. It sounds like you're saying it's all in our heads. Reality, it's in our heads, which most people would call nonsense. Most people that live right now in these times on Earth, I would claim. How is this different from just making everything up? How do you stay scientific while making such a big claim, let's say.
So I don't believe that it's all in our heads, but you can, from a philosophical point of view, you can argue that everything is in our heads, and there's no way you would know the difference or be able to prove that this isn't the case. Just kind of giving the extreme example of if you start with that point, then saying, oh look, but it's obvious there's an objective reality out there. No, that's not obvious at all. There's a big discussion to be had there.
Yeah.
For me personally, and that's what I try to do in the book, is so there seems to be this paradigm change or two going on. One in physics, where it turns out that if you start to think of physics and physical reality in terms of information, you get a lot further and understand more. So there's this informational paradigm shift going on, which has been happening for a while, but it's become more acute with quantum information, quantum computers, where computation and fundamental reality suddenly become interchangeable concepts.
And what is the second? What is the second paradigm? You were talking about two paradigms.
The second thing is that idealism is making a comeback, which seems to be very weird because, idealism says consciousness is fundamental, which for many people is a nonsensical concept. And it's true because you can't really rationally understand what this would mean. But interestingly, there was a phase in philosophy, German idealists with Immanuel Kant, Fichte, Schelling, and Hegel, who started to think in very idealist terms, but then these analytical philosophers under Bertrand Russell came in and said, no, you have to be really focused and exact with your philosophy, and idealism is a silly idea. Yeah. But what we're now seeing in this opening up, and this is also in the context of the Renaissance, the psychedelic Renaissance, where we now have the philosophy of psychedelics, where people are more open to thinking about what these phenomenal experiences mean. Because before that, science was the objective, the outside, the third-person view, and the first-person perspective was irrelevant. And now we're slowly getting to realize that we maybe have to incorporate the first-person perspective. And this is what, these masters of consciousness, I call them, the shamans, the mystics, the meditators, and the psychonauts, who travel in their consciousness to apparently different realms of reality, which seem to be stable and coherent. And they're telling us about these things. And shamanism is 30 to 50,000 years old. So these are ancient things that have been known, which the Western mind is slowly realizing. And I tried to chronicle in the book that today, in 2025, to claim that consciousness is fundamental, it's not a silly idea. It's actually a better metaphysical starting point than physicalism. And it's something which does not at all contradict any empirical knowledge we have. It's absolutely compatible with what we know. So it's a very rational thing to maybe believe in. So at the end of the day, we have to make a choice in what we believe.
Why do
Even
you
if
say? Well, let me jump right in there. Why do you say that consciousness is a good starting point?
No, that idealism as the consciousness being fundamental is a good metaphysical pillar to start to build theories and explore reality, which would give us a totally different trajectory than what science has been on now. So it would open up the scope of what science allows or deems interesting to evaluate.
Okay, I understand. And you touched the topic. I want to get deeper into the topic of shamanism and psychedelics, because I think it has a lot to do here with it. And it's very interesting. And you can go down the rabbit hole and really get into the weeds of psychedelic experiences, the relationship with consciousness, reality, etc. That's super interesting. But first, I want to unpack a bit this, what you call the information theoretic ontology, which sounds very complicated, but basically means, if I'm not wrong, maybe you correct me, I understand that it means that you think reality is made of information instead of matter. And that's what you were talking about, the first paradigm of physics. which is a reality of information, which is basically saying that the universe is more like a sort of a computer program instead of just a bunch of solid objects.
Yes.
Can you give me a simple example that would help someone listening to this, what this actually means? Like when I touch this table, what's really going on according to your view?
Okay, so first two things. These are not my ideas. I kind of chronicle what other people have been thinking, and this information theoretical thing in physics is what's more and more very deep thinkers and famous physicists have come up with.
Yeah.
And exactly the example you say, the table that feels so solid. We know that 99.9 something percent is empty space. It's a tiny, tiny nucleus, and the electron, which doesn't really exist unless you look at it because of this weird quantum probability phenomenon superposition. So already here we have the illusion of solidity and matter, but if you zoom in, we know this is not the case. We know that the best description from physics currently is matter doesn't exist. Subatomic particles are excitations in a quantum field. What does that mean? Like, it's just, okay, shut up and calculate. Just calculate your quantum fields. Don't try and understand what it is. But now more and more physicists were thinking or realizing that if you think of it in terms of computation, so Seth Lloyd, he wrote a beautiful book, Computing the Universe or something like that, where he's saying, look, every interaction of two particles, that's not like two billiard balls coming together and bouncing off. It's a computation. You can understand everything in terms of computation. And actually, this goes back to John Wheeler, one of the biggest, or one of the bigger names in theoretical physics, who came up with this information theoretic formulation, it from bit, where he was saying, we really shouldn't think of stuff being material, but informational. And he went even a step further down the rabbit hole, claiming that, and this is a physicist, this is a very sober, serious person who said, the universe is participatory. We're engaging in this dialogue with it. It's not a one-way street. And going even back further, Carl von Weizsäcker, a German big theoretical physicist from the last century, he also came up with this idea of an UR, a UR. This is one unit of information. And he then tries to re-express physics and computes how much information is in the space, in the universe is possible. And just to give you an example, so entanglement is this weird thing in quantum mechanics where two particles, they interact, and then you can move them as far apart as you want to. And if you interact with one of the particles, the other particle will be affected instantaneously. You cannot use this to transmit information, so you're not violating relativity or anything. But there is some, as Einstein called it, spooky action at distance. So entanglement it's some holistic thing going on. How can two particles at the one end and other end of the universe be connected if they're so far away in space and time? Well, if you say, look, space and time is not the right framework to understand physics,
right?
And even cutting edge theories are saying space and time are probably emergent from quantum information. Space and time are not fundamental. So what's fundamental is this informational space. And if these two entangled particles just remain very close together in the informational space, then entanglement doesn't seem so weird anymore, because you basically just looked at it through the wrong lens, and you thought these particles were very far away, and that seemed to like violate your notions of common sense. But you were thinking in the wrong model. You have to think of it in informational terms, and this is
but
like
what is informational? Sorry to jump in there, but what is informational space? Before I lose track here, because you say space and time aren't fundamental. What's fundamental is informational space. What just in very simple terms, what is that?
So I unfortunately have to disappoint you there. So what is information? It's the same question as what is consciousness. We know what these words are, but if you have to define them, it gets really hard. So there's a philosopher called Luciano Floridi, And he wrote the book, The Philosophy of Information. That's his thing. And the book starts with, information is really a hard concept. It's very context dependent, malleable. We don't really know, like, it depends on how you look at it. So is information something which is instantiated like qubits or zeros and ones, or is information only something that has semantic meaning, or what is information? So there's like a big ambiguity and language conceptual fuzziness around these concepts. But for quantum mechanics, it's a qubit. You can attach one bit, so basically a yes or no, a 0 or 1, to all these quantum subatomic particles and their properties. So this is what Wheeler was saying. That's why he got the idea. He was saying, when we interrogate reality, we're always asking yes or no questions. Is the spin looking up or down? Is it also entanglement you can use for computation? So they realized that somehow the very sort of informational substrate of reality is this digital 0-1 binary thing going on, and it can be incorporated in elementary particles as qubits, which again are very weird concepts, but you can easily do maths with them. The framework it's there. It's this mathematical formulation of quantum mechanics, and you can do computations with it. That's why we have quantum computers. But again, the understanding of what exactly is going on, it's the same problem with all of quantum mechanics, which tells us fundamental reality is incoherent and makes no sense. It's illogical, and we've known this for over 100 years. And it's not rationally understandable. That's why I'm amazed that physicalism, which claims, no, it's logical reality, it has to be rational, we understand it, how this claim could stand for so long, because we know from quantum mechanics that this is not how fundamental reality is. And our classical reality, which is derived from that, okay, that has this coherence and everything, and common sense, that works fine. But somehow, I don't know, if you're more open and thinking about philosophy, you should have maybe earlier on realized that maybe it makes no sense to try and push this onto fundamental reality.
Right.
And the same thing is just quickly to interject with consciousness. We don't know what consciousness is. We still have no definition of what consciousness is. So the book defining consciousness, I think it's the Oxford University Press. They have little booklets called like a short introduction to, and one of them is a short introduction to consciousness, and it starts with, but consciousness is something that we all experience. It's very close to us, but at the same time, it's so hard to understand, and we don't know what it is. So there's this problem here that these concepts, if you try and somehow bring them down to rationality and common sense, they seem to break. Except with the exception that in a scientific context, you can do math and calculations with them and then build technology and stuff.
Hello, beautiful humans. Mr. Rat here, and I'm taking a quick moment to share something I believe in. The Berlin School of Podcasting. If you're fascinated by the power of conversation to shape our future, you should know about the Berlin School of Podcasting programs. Whether it's their online courses or the immersive summer residency in Berlin, they teach you how to craft compelling audio stories and conduct transformative interviews. While we discuss quantum computing, transhumanism, and life in space on the Mr. Rat Show, one ancient human technology will always remain powerful, and that is storytelling. It will always be how we shape our collective future. Your voice matters in the conversation about humanity's path forward. Learn to amplify it at the Berlin School of Podcasting. I learned valuable skills there that are now helping me connect these futurist conversations to your ears. Now let's go back to expanding our minds about what's possible for humanity in the decades ahead. In your book, James, you talk about a concept you call re-enchantment of existence. And from what I understood, you're saying that, let me see if I can phrase it correctly. We kind of live in a world that's become cold and mechanical, where science has sort of drained all the magic out of life and existence. And people, of course, if you look at the news or just walk around your city, you might find people disconnected to themselves, but also to nature. And we kind of believe that we're just random accidents in a meaningless universe. And that sounds sad, but a lot of people would agree with this because we're kind of lost. And so you come in and you say, okay, re-enchantment, which means bringing back that wonder, that meaning and purpose to existence that our ancestors used to have very present in their daily lives, apparently. So first of all, is that right? Is that like a correct sort of understanding of what re-enchantment of existence is?
You nailed what I think it is.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Good. I'm glad I did that. So now here's where I want to push you into more futuristic territory, because the Mr. Rat show is about that. So if this re-enchantment really happens, and if people start experiencing reality as alive and meaningful again, how might that change everyday life? Like, I'm imagining a future where, let's say, architects design buildings that respond to human emotions, and where doctors heal with united consciousness. And it sounds very idealistic and sort of fluffy, maybe, for some people out there. But is this something that we could head towards, like where everything becomes interactive and responsive to our consciousness or collective consciousness?
I mean, maybe taking it a few steps back. So you wonder what happens in 50 years. I think now thinking 50 years seems like impossible with the whole acceleration of things that are happening, with the speed of how the world is changing. I find even 5 years is like unfathomable. I can't imagine the world in 5 years even, because, and looking back, I think in the past you could make 50-year predictions because there weren't so many disruptions happening everywhere at each level as we're seeing now. So I find we are really at the crossroads where what it seems we're going is in a super dark direction. I think we're having a collective psychosis. There's this spiritual disconnect. We all lost the meaning and the purpose in what we're doing. We're destroying the whole biosphere. We gave it a name, ecocide. We have garbage patches in the Atlantic, the Pacific. We have microplastics in our brains. We have PFAS, these forever chemicals. We live in an age of post-truth. Suddenly everyone's lying, and that's fine for some reason. There's conspiracies. We have ideological trenches where people cannot even imagine what the other team is thinking. And this is all one-dimensional. It's only left, right, blue or red. And everyone's become radicalized online in every direction, and inequality. We're soon at numbers ridiculously saying, I don't know, 3 people have as much wealth as 70% of the population. I mean, we're close to getting there. So this is the path we're going down. And I believe the reason we're going down there is because of this disenchantment. And it's not only from science, which claims, look, it's all random, doesn't have a purpose, and you die. But it's also these static dogmatic religions, which are also disenchanting, I find, because they focus on an external authority. And I believe a shift towards idealism can allow something new to happen. And I try and call it, or give it the name, scientific spirituality. So the science part is really important, the consensus reality, the empirical part. So yeah, no conspiracies. Like, you need to know what is happening in real life. And the other part is the spirituality, where you're basically just asked to work with your own consciousness and look within. I mean, this is the meditation, the mysticism, the mindfulness, where you really engage with your own consciousness and try and transform it. And I believe that most spiritual traditions or practices aim at making you a happier person, even if there's suffering around you and you experience suffering, but you deeply inside yourself, you cultivate a sense of happiness and fulfillment. And I believe, yeah,
But
if we
that's
manage
also,
to do that, we could
yeah,
go totally in the other direction. And I can't imagine how utopian and like love individually and our collective intelligence
right.
is the dumbest stuff ever. I mean, you have ants and superorganisms behaving incredibly intelligent at a collective level. And I believe the only reason why we're not doing this is because we have these really bad assumptions
Mm,
of what the fundamental uh, level or yeah, we just have bad metaphysical ideas. One is physicalism and the other is dogmatic static religions. And I really believe that what you describe, I mean, if we start to become more compassionate in the sense that we suddenly realize, hey, we're part of this crazy matrix of life and being on earth, where you then suddenly, why would I be cruel to other people? Why wouldn't I be empathetic to people who are suffering? Why would
mm,
I treat animals badly? Why would I even treat plants badly? Like, why wouldn't there be more connection? And I think this is the thing that happened in the West, where we suddenly became so individualized. And it turns out that this is something most communities or most societies didn't have. So if you asked a person from most societies ever who they are, they wouldn't tell you, I'm this person, my name, I do this and that, like we in the West do. They would tell you how they relate to the context of their community. And this is something the West, which is fine. I mean, you can have this sense of individuality, but we shouldn't forget
mm.
that this is an illusion, because we are part of this living matrix and context. And the more you feel this interconnection, the less I believe you are motivated to harm others, to lie to others, to be cruel to
Right.
others, to steal from others, to behave in a bad way. And I believe this is something we all need to grow up a bit spiritually and just become better people.
So now you mentioned being and this interconnectedness between everyone and everything is sort of one, and we are all related to each other. And how in the West we kind of like went the individual path and we're super disconnected. It takes me right into the next point that I had in my mind when I research a bit about your story and your thoughts, the way you look at the world. You talk about symbolic cognition. And if I'm not mistaken, you kind of suggested that there's this hidden code or language in reality that most of us miss. And just to give you more concrete examples, so also our listeners kind of understand where I'm coming from. Let's say I'm walking down the street and I'm thinking about a major life decision, something that makes me stressed. And I need to take a decision, but I don't know how to react. I don't know how to move next. And all of a sudden, I see an eagle flying over my head, or a big animal, big bird. And in many cultures back in the days, eagles or big birds represented freedom or vision. They would bring a message to you in that way. Are you saying that seeing this eagle or this big bird isn't just random, that it is actually connected to sort of my inner state? That if we develop that symbolic cognition that you talk about, I would be able to read this kind of signs. And therefore, like you were saying before, I could be a happier person, or I could be a more humble, maybe, person, that I would realize, hey, not everything is under my control, so to say. And there's bigger forces. Life is almost like a game that is fun to watch and experience, and I shouldn't be stressed about stuff. Does this make sense?
Absolutely, that's exactly how I would describe it. And so again, if you come from a physicalist perspective, you're like, come on, you're being silly. There's no meaning out there. You're projecting. You're just being immature. You have to grow up and accept the universe has no meaning, has no purpose. But um, there's two things. First of all, if idealism is correct, then there would be a lot of meaning, because there's this base consciousness from which the physical is derived. So you would expect that there should be some patterns in there. And the knowledge that shamans gained, this unorthodox way of accessing knowledge, this seems to be through these channels of more intuitive ways of understanding reality, not only through changing your altered states of consciousness, but being very mindful of the nature, what is happening around you. And this is something that Carl Gustav Jung was very big on, where these ideas of synchronicity. So as a psychologist, he was always very careful to not be associated with any metaphysical ideas, because he was like, no, I'm doing science here. I'm not engaging in philosophical discourse. But synchronicity says, and the reason that this is such a thing is because so many people feel that this is happening. So synchronicity being something happens, something random happens, but for you it seems so very purposeful. And Jung explained, well, maybe there's this other layer of causality behind the things that are happening. And this other layer of causality has meaning and purpose, and it mirrors what's happening inside of us. And this gets us into the area of teleology, that the universe has a purpose. And I find it crazy that every scientist and physicist will tell you, that's a stupid idea. You're trying to like bring religion in or something. There's no purpose. But what we seem to be experiencing, at least on Earth, where we also see it in the cosmos, the universe wants to build structures, complexity. I mean, what's happening here on Earth is insane. The explosion of complex structures, the intelligence in nature. Come on, you can't tell me that this just happened randomly and that's just a brute fact. There seems to be a structuring force in the universe, a hidden force. This can be physical. Maybe we haven't discovered it, which points the universe into defying the entropic decay and allowing it to enable to have these pockets of structure, self-organization, organizing structure formation. This is what we are. This is what we're living in. And in an idealist context, this makes total sense. This is a no-brainer. This is like obvious, and it seems to be an experienced reality for many, many people. This seems to be the right intuition. So again, if you come and say, no, you're just being silly or superstitious, yeah, that also gets you into conflict. Or yeah, I don't know, these are probably bad narratives to be telling children.
Right. And
Yeah.
so if we start recognizing ourselves as co-creators of that universe that you were talking about, that reality, don't you think that put an enormous, or like a big burden on some sort of responsibility on us? Like, how do we handle that psychologically?
Yes,
No.
exactly. But I see this in a positive way, because I feel we're not being accountable for what we're doing. This is
Okay.
something we've delegated, especially if I find a lot of religious people are like, no, God, it's not me. I can't really help anything here. And I find
it's like an
this
external,
exactly.
It's like an external problem, basically.
And I find this idea that you are the center of your own experienceable universe is very empowering, because you are in charge of it and you're responsible and you're accountable for everything that happens in it, even if you weren't directly causing it. But this recontextualization, I find this empowering, because it makes you really as I said, accountable for everything, your thoughts, your words, your actions. You really have to sit down and realize that you are in charge here, and you are the center of your universe. And everyone has that. And we kind of come together in this overlapping external world. But I find that's the thing that we're missing, because if you're really accountable, you wouldn't, I mean, if many people would be accountable for their actions, we wouldn't be in the mess we are today, I would claim. You can only have such a dystopian world. I mean, so many people seem to be suffering and just just outraged and frustrated and feeling helpless and enraged. And this is because they feel powerless. And I believe that recontextualizing these things, and yeah, again, the spirituality helps you there. There's so many techniques from, yeah, Indian wisdom traditions that allow you to cultivate this state of being in charge and dealing with the maybe the negative things that happen in it, but you don't react in a way that you suffer. So the idea that you kind of disconnect from your ego. So your ego is still going through all this drama and trauma, but you realize that that's not really you. I mean, it's part of you, but you're more. You can be the thing that's behind it and observes it. And these are basic meditation techniques. And
Yeah.
I think this would help a lot, that we become more focused inwards. And also this, I mean, this is a historical thing we're enacting, because what the Western mind did, it just went outside and it went into the physical world outside. The focus was always looking outward, exploring, which is great. But now we have to maybe realize that, hey, we also need to look inwards. We need to immerse ourselves in our own consciousness and see what arises there. And then we suddenly reconnect with the shamans, the mystics, the meditators, and the psychonauts, because that's what their thing is. They travel within their consciousness. And apparently, what we're experiencing in sober waking consciousness is just a thin slice of this huge multiverse you can travel and experience and go to. And this is something that's been a blind spot for the Western mind, and it's only slowly that we are realizing this and are starting to open up to these phenomenological first-person experiences and taking them seriously.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a lot the topic of psychedelics and shamanic traditions in your conversations, in your past interviews, in your book, in your talks. And you talk about them as sources of insight, of knowledge. And when I see that, I see that as quite a jump from traditional physics, which is your sort of background. How do you connect strict scientific research with experiences that people may have, for example, in the psychedelics realm, that can't actually be put into words? Because me as someone that has had psychedelic experiences, they're beautiful. And when I come out, people ask me, so how was it? Or explain me, tell me, describe me with words. How was your experience? And there are no words for that. It's almost impossible to describe it. And normally my answer is, you have to experience it to understand what I mean. So how do you connect that strict scientific research with experiences that people cannot actually put into words?
And what you say is exactly the crux of the problem. So there's two modes of knowing. One is theoretical, rational, and one is experiential. And in the experiential, in that context, you can know things which are not accessible to your rational mind. So these transcendental states, experiencing non-duality, experiencing idealism, that experiencing the field of consciousness behind everything. This seems to be a common theme that all these masters of consciousness have been telling us. Behind the things, there's this unified consciousness. But what we also forget for science is that science is a lot of intuition. Even there's a quote by Einstein who said that the only way to find these laws is through intuition. That doesn't sound right, because no, it's you sit down and you're systematic, and that's not really true. And some of the insights that have come came through dreams. Like the one chemist who dreamt of the snakes biting in a tail, and that's how he came up with the idea of a benzene molecule, or the mathematician Ramanujan, who basically rediscovered half of mathematics in isolation in India alone before it was discovered and brought to England, one of the biggest mathematicians. And he claimed that some goddess visited him and showed him these equations. So this is a mathematician. This is a super analytical person. And he claimed that the things he was shown these things. And Ramanujan wrote a letter to Hardy, who was one of the bigger mathematicians in England, to introduce himself. So Hardy gets a random letter from some dude in India, and there's equations in them. And he looks at the equations and he's like, wow, this is crazy. I need to meet this person. So
Right.
he is claiming the source of this knowledge. And that's maybe something we should talk about more. And this also factors into the humility you mentioned before. Maybe we are not the source of creativity. Maybe creativity is something we allow to flow through us, we attach
Right.
to, which makes sense in an idealist perspective, because what you're doing is you're channeling the creativity and the intelligence from the base reality. You become a vessel for this to express. So it's not
Right.
really your theory, your ideas. It's something, the intuition you allow to flow through you. And that's maybe something we forgot, because we think, no, science is about some person sitting down with pencils and with a pencil and writing equations and figuring out stuff. Yeah, that's part of it. But somehow where does this come from? Where does the creativity originate? And maybe that's also something which is outside, and also these non-orthodox ways of accessing knowledge. So the claim that, no, there's only one way to knowledge, rationality, everything else is not true. Well, how come all these indigenous populations are so good at healing with plants? And if you ask them, they say, the plants told us, the plant
Right.
teachers.
Yeah.
And now maybe, yeah, slowly we're realizing there's actually more ways to access knowledge than just through your rational mind. And as you say, the experiential part is something very powerful, which allows you to realize that maybe what I'm experiencing when I'm sober every day is just a tiny part of what's possible in human experience, in consciousness.
It's beautiful to think like that, because then, for at least in my experience, life becomes much more enchanted. Actually,
Exactly.
that's the right word.
and I believe it is. I believe if we're, I don't think this is a hallucination and we're like making it up and we're putting purpose out there. I really believe that this whole thing that's unfolding here, it is like the Hindus call Leela, this cosmic play, this base. So the self is all that exists, the cosmic consciousness, but that's a really boring state because nothing happens. It's
Yeah.
unified. There's no, yeah, it's just very boring. So the self then creates the physical universe with all the duality, the good and bad, and it hides itself so it can rediscover itself. And it's a grand play. It's not something to take personal. It's you're like an actor on stage, but at the same time you're also in the audience, and
Right.
I find this is a beautiful way of looking at the world, and it becomes less personal and less dark and seems more playful, that there's this discovery going on, and it's
Right.
enchanted, even if there is a lot of suffering, but somehow suffering plays an important role in what's happening in evolution of consciousness in the universe for some reason.
How do you think suffering is important then?
Well, I mean, first of all, suffering exists. So either it's wrong, and then it seems to be a weird universe. Like, why would there be this thing that's wrong? Or it's part of the process. It's something which allows you. And a lot of people say that a huge shift in spiritual transformation only became possible through periods of intense suffering, as bad as it sounds, but it just allows you to just go deeper. And this notion of shamanic sickness, where it's like this shaman nearly dies, but then reemerges and then has the powers and is this transformed individual. But you had to go through this dark path to be able to get to the light. And also in psychedelics, I always like to reference Christopher Bache's LSD in the Mind of the Universe, the book where he chronicles 20 years of his life. He's a philosopher of religion, and he did 73 high-dose LSD sessions, 5 to 600 micrograms. The book is the craziest book I've read. And he had one chapter is the ocean of suffering. So he explains how he experienced suffering in like multi-dimensional, multivariate, multifaceted suffering in these sessions, but they were only one part, and he calls it the cleansing, because the suffering part opened up to the blissful part, and the blissful part in the end became so intense that he had to stop because it broke his heart. He could not he could not go into that state again, knowing that he would have to detach. He just like, that's too much for me. This is such a blissful state. I'd rather not go there at all than going there knowing I have to detach. So these are just incredibly crazy extremes of experience that he chronicled for us, going super deep into this transcendental multiverse. And he claims that it's a weird thing, but he seems to believe that suffering is the most noble thing you can contribute to the evolution of this divine unfolding of what's happening in the universe, that more and more consciousness and transcendence wants to come into this universe, and somehow, for some weird reason, suffering is the most noble thing you can do to help it. I mean, these concepts just like, whoa, blow my mind. It's just, but it recontextualizes a lot of things people would think. But it's clear suffering is bad. It shouldn't happen. I don't want to suffer. Yes,
Yeah,
that's true.
it doesn't feel good. It's like I'm gonna use a very stupid analogy, but when you go to the gym and you like exercise your muscles suffer. The fibers, they break, right? But
Yeah.
you have to go through that pain to grow your muscle. So it kind of, it's comparable to
But
that.
that seems like a very super good analogy of what's going on in the consciousness spiritual sphere. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, James, I want to get this right, because you're saying that because we're in a conscious cosmos, we have an ethical imperative toward this interconnectedness and leading the way, sort of like stewarding the way. But most corporations and governments right now in the world we live in, our contemporary times, operate in a complete different, they seem to be operating in a complete different principle, at least on the West. How do you bridge that gap?
Um, so this goes a bit into complexity science, I believe. Um, so historically, humans organized as tribes, and you always had these pyramids of power. So you have the elder of the tribe, or then you have the king, and now you have the CEO, and it's always this pyramid of concentrated power. And this is how we function, and it's a good way to organize, but it's very tribal and archaic. And if we look at nature, nature is really big in decentralized organization. That's a really good template for this collective intelligence. And somehow we're stuck in this centralized way of doing things, and it worked for a long time, but now reality has become so complex, so interconnected, so fast, that these are just such bad templates to deal with these realities. And somehow we need a shift from these centralized power structures to decentralized power structures, like nature does most of the time. I would claim that this is something we should learn from nature, which we've understood through complexity science, that you need multiple hubs. You need to have this spread out, and then if you do that, sometimes you get the magic of self-organization, of emergence, of collective intelligence coming out of these systems. And we're missing feedback loops. Our economics is super dumb because there is no value that we put on clean air, a clean river. If you put a value on a forest, a river, a bird, and you could do that, and if you price that in, then pollution, like polluting stuff or deforestation, would be so expensive you wouldn't do it, because you realize the value that you're destroying there. But we define our value in a very specific context, that the tragedy of the commons, that you just like ignore everything else that it would be super important for um, a sustainable system to happen. So sustainability, resilience, we've never engineered human systems that have that. All our systems they suck because they keep collapsing, and we try and cobble them together again, but they're not resilient, they're not adaptive, they're not sustainable. And these are the key words of all the systems that nature built and has been running for whatever 3.5 billion years. So maybe we should pay more attention to this. But again, we have this ideological problem that you start to draw a boundary around your family, around your community, around your city, around your country, and everything which is outside of that wall is your enemy. It's something different. It's the thing you want to combat or you're afraid of. And yeah, at one point we just have to realize that these are self-imposed restrictions, which it's clear that they made sense why they evolved, but now we interconnected the whole world. The world became globalized a long time ago, and now informationally, that we really should rethink our governance structures. And I don't know if countries and presidents and CEOs and if that's really a good thing to do. So we have this fun parliament in Switzerland where we have the Bundesrat, which is 7 people. So for us, we don't have this like president sort of fetish where it's this one person is super important. You have these 7
like
people,
superhero.
And exactly, most Swiss people couldn't even tell you who they are at the moment.
Okay.
Which I find is kind of a funny thing. And we have this idea of federalism where each canton does its own thing a bit. So of course you have inefficiencies, but it somehow goes a bit into this decentralized idea of trying to spread out the decision making.
Right.
I mean, obviously Switzerland is far away from like anything like good or perfect, but still it's a different way of governance, which is interesting. But the question is, we're like only 8 million people, so. But again, it should be scalable, no, because these are decentralized ways of governance, so it should easily be scalable, actually.
Okay, I see what you mean. I mean, Switzerland is always the example to follow, let's say, for many countries. Maybe one of the reasons is that the decentralized government. Then you see other countries that also function very well when they're super centralized. Some countries in the Gulf region are like that, and they seem to be economically thriving at the moment. They're not decentralized at all. They're more centralized than any.
Aren't they at the beginning of a trajectory where centralization still works? But
could be. That's a good point.
But when they start to sort of reach some level of complexity, that suddenly they run into the same problems that we have.
Yeah, you're right. Could be that they have simpler ways of organizing themselves, let's say, and they don't question them much. Maybe they're not very critical, but it works for them at the moment. But it could be that it's just the stage they're in. Maybe that's correct. Yes.
But what I see also is that there's an openness towards technology in the future, which I think is happening more there than in the West or in the US or America. This openness to embrace what's coming, the new thing, which is a cool thing.
I think so. And in general, when I travel the world, I have the chance to meet different cultures, different ways of seeing life and the world and humanity and the future. And I see 2 major trends, and I want to get your view on this. And these 2 major trends are, on the one hand, I see humans becoming more technological, almost transhuman. There's a thin line, a very blurry line between what's tech and what's human for those people. And then on the other hand, you see people getting more into spirituality, trying psychedelics, connecting more with nature. In your view, are these forces compatible? Can they be synthesized or work together?
I think so. I mean, I think that's like the coolest combination you can have. Because you have the technology. This is amazing. This is crazy. Use it, but use it in a way where you are empowered, where you are still not forgetting that you have to do work inside of yourself. You can't just have the outside world solve all your problems. With technology, you have to deal with your own problems, which would be the spirituality part looking in. So the scientific spirituality part, the scientific part would embrace technology, make life easier, make it better for everyone. So cool, let's do that, let's leverage this, but do it in a way that doesn't end up being destructive, as usually most innovations unfortunately happen to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. When you think about this scientific spirituality and you think about the future, if that vision of scientific spirituality become mainstream, if people start truly believing that, let's say, through technology, with technology, or along with technological development, consciousness comes in and starts shaping reality more and more, and we start feeling more connected with this, let's call it, cosmic field of awareness, how would you think society will transform? I'm imagining communities organizing themselves based on, let's say, decision making through group meditation rather than voting, or even healing practices where intention becomes as important as pharmaceuticals. I'm not saying pharmaceuticals go down, I'm saying they become as important. Is this where you think we could be headed?
Yes, definitely. And I think you've been thinking more about these things than I have, because I just see the crossroads and the one road going down that avenue, which would be really amazing and just so cool if there would be, just a better future. And I haven't actually been thinking too much about what this would entail or how it would manifest. So I think you have an advantage there over me that you've been contemplating this.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. No,
again,
I like to say, yeah.
it's so wild what the possibilities could be. I mean, the
Yeah.
the changes, like how the world today is versus 5, 15, 20, 50, 70, 100 years ago. It's wild. And that's why
It's wild.
really 5 years is it could be, everything could be drastically different in a better way or in a super worse way, and it's up to us today to set the trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, you've mentioned before that technology must align with ethical principles to avoid, or I believe, to avoid dystopian outcomes. So, given the current trends that you see in the world, are you optimistic or pessimistic, rather, about our ability to navigate these moments of
So
life?
I have two levels there. If I rationally look at the world, I'm like super pessimistic, but I cultivate inside myself an optimism where I think it's everything is fine and will be fine. And but this is kind of
Yeah.
my way of navigating exactly this, that I keep an optimistic, happy mindset, although I'm looking at this thing and thinking, man, this is going to end terrible if we don't really quickly change.
Yeah. It happens that one day you can be optimistic, and the next day you see something in the news or hear something that happened, and you're like, "How is this possible? How are we going to get out of this?"
But I still try not to be perturbed by that, and just like trust in this process of this teleology of the intelligence unfolding in the universe. And I believe this
Yeah.
is a process, this is happening. So even if there's a short dent in the the overall trajectory, I do believe it's going that way. So there's nothing we can actually do that will prevent this from happening at the end of the day. So that's where I am actually, from a rational perspective, optimistic, because this seems to be what the universe is designed to do, and it will be doing it, even if we try and oppose it and sort of try and prevent this from happening. It'll unfold. It will happen.
I agree. I think if you zoom out and you look at the macro picture, you can become more optimistic. But if you like zoom in and start looking at some of the details, it can be quite challenging to be optimistic. I
But
agree with you.
but then it can be such a quick thing, these tipping points, which we also know from complex systems, where the system looks inert and you think it's never going to change, it's never going to change, but then suddenly it reaches a tipping point, and then instantly it reconfigures in a totally different equilibrium. And this can happen for everything. This can happen for the climate, but also our social world we live in, where if more people start to realize that there is maybe more to reality than just blind consumerism, that maybe reality is a bigger thing unfolding, maybe consciousness is totally different to what you thought, maybe death is a different context than what your religion or what your scientific intuition was telling you. I mean, if enough people are open to rethinking these things, then I believe change could happen really quickly. And as far as I'm seeing, this is happening. We are in the middle of a paradigm shift, which hasn't quite become too visible, but it's something shifting, I feel. And let's hope that this continues and leads to a brighter future.
Well, what's the role, in your opinion, James, to close up the conversation? What's the role, in your opinion, of psychedelics and this type of altered mind states, or reshaping how we see life and how we look at the world and the existence in general?
I would like to quote, I think it was Huxley, who did the mescaline experiments in the 50s and wrote about it in The Doors of Perception. They asked him exactly that question in an interview. Who should take these substances? And he said, anybody who has certainty of what's going on. And he then said, especially professors.
Wow.
And I find that's exactly the power there. So if someone comes and says, look, there is no non-physical stuff, idealism is stupid, there's no way this can be true, please take ayahuasca, smoke DMT, take 500 micrograms of LSD, and we have a conversation of what you experienced and what you think is going on. Or if you come to me and say, my God, it's written in this book, this is how reality works, I also would invite that person to make these experiences and then come back and see if their spirituality didn't get augmented and opened up and became more generic than just this one book, this one static, dogmatic thing. And that's where I see the power that psychedelics can really break open your head. Even if you have very entrenched ideological beliefs, I think that psychedelics are a medicine to just blow up this whole resistance you have built up in your mind. And that's probably also the dangerous part, which everyone should be warned about the dangers of psychedelics, because they are no laughing matter. They are existentially threatening, and exactly because they can do that. And that's where I think that if we allow for more, I mean, just decriminalizing psychedelics is probably a good thing for society. And in Switzerland, we're just in the middle of a 3-year phase where the government wants to know, if we legalize THC, how would this work? And now there's a trial period, and you can get your weed at the pharmacy, and this is all opening up. And I believe if people start to engage with these things in a healthy manner, knowing what the risks are, knowing who shouldn't do that, that maybe we sort of glimpse beyond this physical, individualized reality we've all built for each other, for ourselves, this cage that we maybe start to glimpse and look over outside of these constraints and see that, actually, I can be so much more bolder in my beliefs and how I look at what reality could be, and be more open to experiencing, and even things like this symbolic cognition. Can I see patterns that are talking to me in in the world that maybe guide me?
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, also, again, like I said before, life becomes much more fun if you think
Which it
of
should.
life.
Life should be
like
fun.
that.
We should all wake up in the morning and like, hey, this is awesome. Look at all this amazing
Let's explore.
stuff.
Yeah,
We're in this crazy
exactly.
universe. What's happening? Why am I here? This is crazy. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. It has been a mind-blowing conversation. You've challenged us to see ourselves not as an isolated being in a sort of dead universe, but as participants, co-creators of a living conscious cosmos where our thoughts and actions literally shape reality. And I want to thank you for these profound insights and especially for daring to propose that the universe might be something much more mysterious than your physicist colleagues talk about.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was great.
Thank you. And to all you beautiful humans listening today, until next time, stay curious, question everything, and maybe, just maybe, start treating consciousness like it's the most important frontier we've yet to explore. Thank you. Hasta la vista.
Here at the Mr. Rad Show, we provide first-hand information straight from the original source of knowledge. The personal opinions of our guests don't necessarily reflect those of Mr. Rad. This show is brought to you by The Rad House, an unbiased, transparent, agendaless, independent media house. Our theme music is written and produced by Marco Mello.